from that, within the first 2 years, this just builds our foundation. Now, of course, we have a whole lifetime through our development into the teens, into the adults, of all these other relationships and experiences that we have that help to formulate and change the attachment.
This is the Deep Dive with Adam Roa.
So attachment theory is based on the relationships that we first form with our primary caregivers, whether that be our parents or otherwise. And it is how well they were able to meet our needs, how well they were able to attune, which means read our facial expressions, our body language, our cries, to be able to meet what it is that we needed or wanted. And we can look at those basic core needs, those core basic needs, into a few different A's. So affection, appreciation, allowing, acceptance, and availability, and attention. So if those emotional needs aren't met, or if our physical needs aren't met, or safety isn't met, then it activates it creates the development of the nervous system in a way that would most benefit us. So kind of like what we were talking about earlier, hyper arousal. Like if we perceive that we're not going to be safe or we're not going to get our needs met, then it would be advantageous for our body to kick into fight or flight mode in order to get those needs met, in order to keep us safe. Or for some of us, if we perceive that if our needs aren't important, or if our parents turn away, or even just like turn their faces away when we're reaching out to them, then it gets stored in our nervous system that it may not be safe to be expressive. And so we might do more hypoarousal or shutting down, as if to quell the attachment need, or make it so that, turn it off so that we don't actually need somebody else. So from that, within the first 2 years, this just builds our foundation. Now, of course, we have a whole lifetime through our development into the teens, into the adults, of all these other relationships and experiences that we have that help to formulate and change the attachment. We also have with specific people, we might have a different alchemy with one person than when we do with another. And so it's quite complex. Unfortunately, there's a lot of conversation about it, which is amazing. And the conversations that I'm seeing repeatedly had are pop psychology versions of this. And I have heard multiple couples where one will come to me and say, my girlfriend says that I'm avoidant, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, you're more than likely not avoidant, because I know you. But because they read a book or because they read an article, they oftentimes will just use one of the 4 categories, and I'll get into that, and label somebody as this, like this is your personality, instead of understanding that this is such a complex theory that there are actually 19 different subcategories, and we often change, and we often have elements of every single one of them. So to call one person one thing or another is not acknowledging the uniqueness of an individual, and can also create more shame type of conversation. So what you'll often hear in conversation is these 4 categories of secure, which means that your relationship needs were met. You have a strong sense of trust, like an epistemic trust with other people, that your needs will get met, that they're telling the truth, that you can rely on them. Anxious, which, how do I want to say this? So let me describe this a little bit differently. This might be easier. So if we draw a quadrant with one line going straight up and down vertically and another line that's going horizontal in the middle of that one.
Like a plus sign.
Like a plus sign. One of those is a spectrum of avoidance. And avoidance is whether it's the inability to connect with our emotions as they are live on the surface of our body, or maybe it's that we have a difficult time with communicating things that we need or even know that we have needs. This is oftentimes the feeling that intimacy or growing intimacy is dangerous, that it's actually a threat. And the further you are on that spectrum, a lot of times what we'll see is people will feel like if the person, and this has to do with intimacy, building intimacy, if the person actually knows who I am, then they won't want to be with me. So the more that you are on that avoidance spectrum, I would look at the underlying belief that you may be holding there as a sense to protect yourself. And then on the other axis is anxious. So the more anxiety that you get in a relationship or regarding a relationship, and those can manifest as actions that would drive you to gain greater closeness with the other person. So there's a fear of abandonment. There's a fear of losing that attachment with this particular person. So sometimes they'll do what we call protest behaviors. And those are things like trying to make the other person jealous, or incessantly calling the phone, or obsessively thinking about the other person, or worried about the status of the relationship. Sometimes difficulty with authenticity and abandoning yourself or self-sacrificing yourself for the sake of holding this relationship. So all of us fall somewhere along that spectrum. And if you may be high in anxiety and low on avoidance, and then we would categorize you primarily around the anxious aspect of it. And if you are low on anxiety or high on avoidance, then we may say that you have more of avoidant tendencies. Secure is the category where somebody has less of either of those things. And then somebody who's high in both of them, we often say that they have more fearful abilidant tendencies. So, and again, we all we can dart around on this chart. I can't even talk today. Thank God I love myself. But we can move around on that. And also as we grow, and if this is something that we are intentionally working on, then we can evolve out of that, or we can become more secure, or we can still have anxiety, but act secure. So we can still create secure relationships no matter where you're at on the chart. So ultimately, I like to say, knowing these things about you isn't necessarily saying that you are this personality. It's more, and it's not even like we measure you by the behaviors that manifest, because I can be avoidant, have more avoidant tendencies, but still have some anxious behaviors and some secure behaviors.